Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of Scaling, right? So it's lucky 8 of Scaling in APAC. So time flies. This is already our 8th episode. So APAC is literally the fastest growing and one of the most important region, whichever part of the world you're operating in, you would like to get your hands on APAC. Right. So today we are going a little bit deeper into Southeast Asia, where we will have some very, very interesting conversation with our guest speaker. So whether you are a seasoned business owner, founder, or who wants to expand your business to this part of the fastest growing region, right? Myself, I'm from MediaShock, and my great partner here, Colin, will bring together great knowledge from seasoned founders and people who have grown massively in APAC. Yeah. And these people have got real hands-on experience. They've fought the battles, they've got scars, they've learned, they've failed, they've grown, right? So that's what it's exactly all about. So these are not people who only have academic knowledge, people have really walked the talk. So my influencer friend here has got a huge following. People want to speak to him all the time, and whenever I go on out there into trade shows, exhibitions, I say the name Colin, they all know who that botak is. Right, so Colin, can I invite you to introduce yourself and a little bit about Scaler, the most influential company out there?
Yes, it's good to know that my LinkedIn, Instagram, and our OnlyFans following is growing. We don't use OnlyFans. No, jokes aside, I am a serial entrepreneur, so I'm involved in a number of businesses, all centered around technology. We own an accelerator, so that's helping early stage companies in the UK to basically build and scale their business. We own a consulting firm. We specialize in working with growth stage companies to help them expand into APAC, so we do recruitment and go-to-market. And shortly, we will also be launching our own fund, so a lot of exciting stuff going on. But I guess second to what Ming Song was saying, Asia Pacific is an amazing place. If you can crack APAC, it's one of the most, well, actually a lot of the time it is the most lucrative market in the world. It's 2/3 of the world's population. You've got 8 of the 20 economies that have got the highest GDP per capita. A significant amount of tech innovation comes out of this region, and you've got countries that have got some of the fastest growing GDPs in the world. The fun part is, most people don't speak the same language. It's extremely fragmented. You take a market like Korea, which is an amazing market, but only 2 countries in the world speak Korean. So unless you're going to be doing deals with Kim Jong-un, your friend, it's a highly fragmented market, and it just requires a different approach to be able to do it. So we started this show to interview people that have been those battle-hardened, go-to-market revenue leaders of tech unicorns. How did UiPath, Datadog, Twilio, Deal, how did they break into this region? How did they turn this into a profitable region? So that's a little bit about myself. Ming Song, talk to us about yourself and what MediaShock does.
Right. Humble MediaShock? No, we shouldn't be that humble anymore. We help companies, especially in tech space, right, communicate complex messages, because a lot of times we find that founders, especially tech founders, they build wonderful stuff, really complex. And there is a gap into communicating that a little bit more clearly. So we help put that together, make sure that it engages the audience they're speaking with, it engages the VC they're speaking with, so that they can truly benefit the people they have built their product and solutions for. And we do this across multiple languages, culture. We work with local partners to make sure the messaging gets through the noise and to the people who need to understand and know about what you do. Right, so that's a little bit about what we do over here. So we help grow and scale the companies we work with through content. Right, so before we kick off today's episode with an exciting announcement, all the way at the end. So be sure to stay till then. So in the last episode where we had Dane Hudson join us, we covered impactful leadership and what traits does an impactful leader possess. So today, on expansion, especially in Southeast Asia, we've got a very, very interesting and charismatic guest, right? He talks about go-to-markets, and one of our good friends as well. He is very charismatic, and the way we have spoken to him, this guy is humble, but yet he's ambitious, Right. Could you share a little bit about our dear guest over here?
Absolutely. He's one of my favorite bangs. So Jing Rui and I have been friends for a year and a half. Actually, I think it was about 3 weeks into me moving to Singapore, where the way that I would probably describe him is he's like the Singaporean version of me, or I'm the Ang Mo version of him, where his expertise is doing go-to-market in Southeast Asia, but very much focused on the largest economy in Southeast Asia, which is Indonesia. Now, to, I suppose, the audience that may potentially be outside of Southeast Asia or outside of Asia Pacific, Indonesia, I believe, has something like 270 million people. It's a very, very interesting market. It's got a lot, more people know it probably for Bali outside of this particular region, but it's also a major economy. However, it's also one of the most unique and confusing places to do business in, not just in Southeast Asia, but in the world. There's a lot of different languages, dialects, it's quite fragmented. The capital city is sinking. There's lots of Australian bogans drinking bintangs in Bali, but there's a lot of major deals and there's a lot of unicorns that have come out from Indonesia as well. So Jing Rui has developed this amazing network. He's created an amazing playbook, and I'm looking forward to everyone learning basically how to penetrate the largest economy in Southeast Asia, as well as one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And don't tell him that I called him an bang, but we're looking forward to hearing his insights. So without further ado, let's dive in. Please join me in welcoming the Jing Dog.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jing Rui from Venture Seed Consulting. I've been doing go-to-market consultancy for companies to Southeast Asia for the last 3-4 years already. We have a wonderful team based in Indonesia that helps to run a lot of the local operations. If anybody ever asks me, what is the secret to go-to-market, or how do I open a market from 0 to 1, I always run through my favorite playbook, which we've been sort of doing the last 3 or 4 years. It's gone through a few rounds of iteration. The first thing that anybody believes or anybody that lands in Southeast Asia thinks is we're going straight for customers. I see this a lot with, big companies that are hungry for revenue. More often than not, they've actually just raised another series or another round of fundraising, and there are pressures to deliver on that round. And what happens is we have a very unique situation where they have zero presence, zero marketing, and essentially no clear footprint, but are expected to deliver within a 6-month, 1-year time frame. Now, if any business owner out there knows, to close your first deal in 6 months, especially in this region, you must be absolutely out of your mind. You haven't even done a very clear product market fit. You don't know the kind of challenges that companies or consumers face here, and most importantly, you're not very clear on your positioning. That's where I think the first thing you need to spend the time to do is a lot of localization, is a very clear understanding of the problems, and more importantly, the personas in the region. A lot of people mistake that, we'll buy products on value. We actually buy a lot on problem statements, pain points, and relationships. And those 3 things come in very harmoniously together. You can't have one without the other. And I'll explain why. If you want to get a problem statement, and it's my first time meeting you, am I obliged to tell you the top 3 challenges that my business is facing? Am I obliged to share with you the kind of decision-making power I have when I don't know who you are, where you're from, or what you want from me? A lot of people make that mistake of coming to Southeast Asia without the intent to build the relationship. They just want the revenue, they want to know the problem statements. And I always emphasize repeatedly, build relationships. Spend the time to understand the market first and make friends. Once people are comfortable, you'll start to hear the problem statements and you'll get to understand their personas, their decision-making powers a lot better. Once you have those relationships, it's now time to accelerate on them. And I'm now going into the playbook that I talked about. Now that it's been very clear that you've established your product market fit, you know the problem statements, you've maybe even gotten 1 or 2 prospective interests in the market, we're now going to dive into the sort of 3 segments of go-to-market that I've identified, and I work very closely with Colin from Scalar to conceptualize, strategize, and operationalize this. The first portion, we'll be talking about entry and landing, meaning getting your first 3 customers in Southeast Asia. Then we'll be talking about exponential growth. Once you've landed your first 3, how do you then start to build for scale? And then lastly, we're talking about scaling. We're talking about building it and replicating it in other countries. Because what a lot of people mistake in Southeast Asia is that what I do in Indonesia can be replicated from Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. That is completely false because each market has their own unique sets of communities, decision makers, hierarchies, and regulations that all of us have to navigate together. But I'm going to go back to the start to talk about your first 0 to 1 and landing your first 3 customers in Southeast Asia. When you've gotten the interest, you understand the problem statements, you've essentially built together material which you can use to engage people in Southeast Asia. You're now going to go into market, spend the time and invest the effort to get to know people better, share about your product, share what you do, how you're solving their very critical problem statements. But when you're going to do this, one of the biggest points of resistance you're going to get is, if I'm interested to work with you, what's your local presence? And more importantly, why is the trust there? If I'm talking to, example, an Australian or someone from the US that's based in Indonesia, that's coming to Indonesia to sell these products, you're 20 hours away by flight or sometimes 8 hours away by flight. Locally, if my systems go down or there's issues with the product, you're not going to be able to provide a service level that makes me comfortable to work with you. And that's where the partnership model comes in. Partnerships help to address and localize you in Southeast Asia without having to build your own sales team and deploy capital to run your go-to-market operations. And it's not about having 20, 30, 40 partners. It's that first 5 who you work very closely with. You invest a lot of time and effort to build the relationship with them, to allow them to understand your product, the pain points that customers are facing, and how these can be addressed through your product, providing them with the support and being very flexible on the pricing because it's still a very price-sensitive region. This helps you to alleviate a lot of the points of resistance that you're going to face in Southeast Asia. And with that, you're going to find conversations are a lot smoother when you're saying, hey, these are the problem statements that I'm able to address. Here's how my solution does it. Here's how we're better than everyone else in market. Not only that, we also have a local partner that's able to support you, provide you the service level that you are looking for, and more importantly, build that relationship and that comfort. And now that you've landed your first 3 logos, we're going to be focusing on the next part, which is scaling up and really helping you to realize the market opportunities here in Southeast Asia. The mistake a lot of companies make at this point in time is this is where they build their sales team. They shift to a full KPI model and it becomes a very metrics-based game when running their APAC operations and their revenue operations. That is important, and that's how you should run the business correctly. But when you forget about your relationships, the problem statements and the personas, the anchors that got you here in the first place, that's what will really derail a lot of the opportunities that you found and that you've created from nailing your first 3 logos in Southeast Asia. One of the biggest concepts that I've recently been sharing with some of my partners and very close friends is this concept called social capital efficiency. It means, how do you build very close, very deep relationships at scale? Especially for myself as an individual founder, we need to be able to manage all these critical relationships with all our stakeholders very well. But I only have 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. Social capital efficiency does not mean prioritizing people or saying that just because this guy gives me more money, he's going to be a lot better. Social capital efficiency is about understanding which relationships are going to be reciprocal, that people see the value in the relationships and they're willing to build it with you. Focus on those where you really do see the win-win. There are lots of people in this region, whilst yes, we are very relationship driven, that are here to make a quick buck off of you. Be very sensitive, understand agendas very well, and more importantly, when you find those hidden gems that are willing to invest in you and willing to build that relationship with you, be very quick to capture that Spend lots of time. Be very clear in what you're willing to commit and how much you appreciate them and how far you're willing to take this relationship to go with them. Because if they see that, they're going to be even more willing to reciprocate with you. Another way to look at this stage is really about where are the focus segments? Where are the repeatable opportunities? Where are the repeatable segments that face the same problem statements that your first 3 logos are facing? You're going to need to do market research, but I like to look at working with communities in Southeast Asia, whether it be the MDEC or in Indonesia, the CIO community Axion, run by the wonderful gentleman Pak Ray Sugiarto. These are the communities that will get you the access, not because they know everybody in town. Well, that's of course how they get it done, but more importantly, they are close and they are very well connected to the communities that you want to tap into. A community-based approach provides a very comfortable area to build relationships, where it's really not transactional. Now that you've scaled up, you're probably seeing anywhere from 5, 10 to 15 accounts, hopefully even 20. This is the point that you've probably had maybe a 2 to 3 packs sales team in the region. Maybe you're doing really well in 1 or 2 markets. And the next question that maybe your investors or you, in terms of your aspirations, have for the region is, let's go at scale. The biggest challenge at this point would be the ability to manage local teams. I'll give you a very great example of this challenge. Today is Friday. You're coming into office at 12 p.m., but where is the rest of your team? They're actually out for Friday prayers in Indonesia because that is the culture. And we have to be respectful and mindful of these cultures and learn how to manage our teams, especially if we've pivoted to that KPI or revenue-focused model where we're looking at numbers every day. That is just within Indonesia. Now you repeat that for Malaysia, and then you go to Thailand where they have their own set of public holidays, and you have all these challenges and all these localizations that you need to learn how to manage. But I hardly ever tell people that these are challenges because the way you need to approach it, and when you want to really scale up in Southeast Asia, is you need to go local and stay local. But don't try to clump Southeast Asia or ASEAN as one market. They are never one market. Some of the most successful multinational corporations in Southeast Asia have country heads for each country because that is the extent that they have to go to manage each geography. And you have to take that approach. Having a country manager to lead Thailand for that first 1 year, ramping up, that is critical and quintessential if you want to be able to make it. Thinking that someone who successfully opened the Singapore market is able to duplicate the same success for Vietnam is the least likely outcome possible. There are many success cases, don't get me wrong, but it is more likely that those Singaporeans were willing to invest the time in a relationship to really go there and be there. They themselves have had some encounters or understanding of the Vietnamese culture. But my advice is to go local and stay local. Hire and groom an outstanding local team. For example, an Indonesian country head should be run by an Indonesian. The Vietnamese division should be run by a Vietnamese. Because only they know how to manage their own local counterparts and their own local accounts. They've been embedded in the culture, something that we will struggle to do. I've been going to Indonesia for 5 years, and I still struggle to catch on to the slangs and the diversity packed into just Jakarta alone. Can you imagine going to Medan and Surabaya or Makassar where they have their own unique set of cultures? That, combined with our lack of understanding, not even from within this region because I'm Singaporean, already puts you at a very strong disadvantage. But the biggest thing that you're not willing to let go of is trust. How willing are you to trust a local Vietnamese, Thai, or Indonesian, or Malaysian even, to run that local operations? You need to be willing to trust and empower, and you need to be okay to fail and make mistakes in hiring. That is a reiterative process, but to go local and stay local is the only way, sincerely, to be able to manage a Southeast Asian operations. In conclusion, what I've shared today is very much a simplified playbook of how if I were to work with you, or anybody were to advise you coming to Southeast Asia, would want to tell you to come to market. Start by investing the time to understand the market. Don't talk about your features or what makes you better than everybody. Focus on the relationships, the problem statements, and the personas. When you're coming here, you want to come here in the most efficient way possible. Work with partners because they provide you with the local context, the localization, and the access. As you scale up and you've hit your first 3 logos with those partners, you're now going to want to focus on working with communities, deepening your relationship with your partners, and even working or building your own sales team. And as you realize that you have a captive market, you've hit some form of product market fit, you have anywhere from 10 to 15 customers in market, and you're thinking, I'm going to set up an operations for the whole of APAC or ASEAN or Southeast Asia, don't forget, it is not one homogeneous market. Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, they have their own unique market. And that means you got to go local and stay local. And in all this, do not ever neglect the importance of cultural nuances and that relationship building, because those are the anchors to helping you gain a foothold in this market. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm Jing Rui from Venture Seed Consulting. We help international companies expand to Southeast Asia at scale. We run essentially a 3-month to 1-year program helping you to build your product market fit here in Southeast Asia. Stay tuned to watch the most Australian Singaporean talk to the most Singaporean Australian ever, La, as Colin would say. And I look forward very much to having the fireside chat with him. And shout out to Media Shock for the awesome recording studio. It's awesome here.
I'm really excited to be sitting here with you and doing this interview. As a good friend of mine, as our first go-to-market partner, and as someone which is very, very complementary to what we do. Let me start with this. We both do go-to-market. We both do Southeast Asia. How did you get into doing go-to-market, and why Indonesia?
That's an excellent question.
I'm an excellent man.
Oh, absolutely. And I always hold you to that. We started as a market research company in Indonesia. We thought, because of the lack of information that existed there, there'd be a space for this. But what we realized is, what's the point of research if you're not going to make any money from it? So we evolved from market research to go-to-market, because that's where the value is. You know, how are we helping you get revenue in the market? And as we went through that whole process, we realized, interestingly, that there is both a science and an art to it. And the scientific methodology is the part that you and I have worked on, and you sort of coined it. You know, we're talking about that partnership model. That's the science which I talked about in that masterclass earlier. But the art to it, and this is the part that nobody really enjoys, but it's absolutely necessary, is that relationship building. And why I say a lot of people don't enjoy it is you don't know where it's going to go. It's extremely laborious. You're like a full-time concierge. But if you get the right ones, oh man, it's absolutely worth it. Yeah. So it's been a ton of fun figuring it out. And what we see is we have great relationships. On the business side, it's outstanding because we've shifted from a project-based model to a fully recurring revenue-based model. And that just makes sense. We love that recurring money.
So Indonesia, where you and I, I guess when you and I started collaborating is, I have always just looked at, so Singapore is the hub and the gateway for the rest of Asia Pacific.
Yep.
That's what my experience had always been. I guess for the Angmo audience or people which aren't familiar necessarily with doing business in Indonesia, what makes it an amazing market, but also what makes it such a complex market?
I'll talk about the complexity first. And I want to be the first to straightaway tell people that Indonesia, for all the metrics and all the numbers that people talk about, it is still one of the toughest markets to crack, no matter how exciting you think it is. The cultural nuances, first thing, you know, what is important to locals? Their spending power. The purchasing power parity is incredibly different. And that means spending habits are fundamentally different. You know, that's the first thing. So the concepts of their growing middle class, all these kind of things, very exciting. But do you know how hard it is to capture those people when their purchasing power parity is only as such? Relationships and enterprises, you know, they don't exactly market themselves or make themselves open on LinkedIn to go and find them.
Yeah.
And even if you do find them on LinkedIn, I don't think I've ever seen a lot of people, or anyone in fact, close a deal on Zoom in Indonesia. It's just the way it is. You have to go there, you have to build that relationship. Now, what makes it incredibly exciting is the maturity is still developing. And what I mean by that is, companies are still riding that digitalization wave, which means unlike markets like Singapore, where all our enterprises are very well digitally connected, Indonesia still has some room for companies to come in and capture opportunities. People are still very open to tech. And the buying mechanics are also a lot different. Yes, they will evaluate your product. Yes, they will go through the whole technical financial modeling to see that the product makes sense. But they do place a much bigger emphasis on trust, which talks on the earlier point that I talked about relationships earlier. And that is essentially what makes it really exciting, because a completely new startup that's never landed in Southeast Asia before, but if the founder decides to spend 4 months living in Jakarta building relationships, he might be able to outdo one of the big boys and win a huge enterprise deal. The market is extremely open and the opportunities are there.
That's
and
really
anybody can win.
That's really, really interesting. So how do you build trust and relationships in Indonesia? So let's say completely new to the market. Also bearing in mind, Indonesia is colossal.
Yep. Yep.
It's a very, very, very big population. So I'm guessing we're talking about Jakarta and maybe a couple of other cities.
Yeah.
So how would you go about doing it? Like, let's just say, what is a playbook? We're entering Asia, we want to go into Indonesia. What is the advice that you would give them for this is what you should do to land your first sale, this is what you should do to get the company profitable?
I want to talk about first sale because profitability is a completely different challenge in Indonesia. You know that a lot of startups even in Indonesia, haven't even hit profitability. But let's talk just about first opportunity, right? I always love this analogy, throwing the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
You know, you can throw your entire toilet at them for crying out loud. But you know, it's really about that kind of mentality to build that relationship. And it's not about, you know, taking like $100 US bills and just throwing at them. No, that's absolutely the last thing you should do. It's about spending the time, getting to know them, being in country, being in market, understanding, you know, their problem statements, building up and understanding their personas, who they are as a person before their title or before, you know, who they are working as, and getting to know them on an individual level. And that builds the trust. Okay, and then the second part that Scalar has very fantastically coined up and come up with is that partnership model. Because you can have the relationship, but if you don't have a local team and local partner that can support you, deliver on your SLAs, understand the local cultures and norms when it comes to things like implementation, you know, how working environments are, you're not going to be able to do it. So setting up that whole ecosystem with a local partner, getting to understand, build really quality relationships and investing in it. And here's the problem on investing. Some people invest and they're immediately looking for a return.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you go, people can feel agendas. You know, if I sit across you, hey Colin, I'm here to get 5,000 out of you. But you know what? I'm going to treat you to 3 dinners before I finally decide, let's work together. You're going to feel it. You're going to know it. You got to go and you got to try to remove the agenda. And the easiest way to do that is to take off your work persona. You know, you're not going there as Colin from Scalar. I'm not going there as Jing Rui from Venture C. You're Colin, the most Singaporean Angmo, and I'm Jing Rui, the most Angmo Singaporean. You're Singaporean lah, yeah. And that helps to essentially break the mold away and get to know each other on a personal level. Taking an interest in the things they do. Having shared common interests, lowering that barriers, and making them comfortable. That opens it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really interesting because it's kind of like standard 101 rapport building stuff.
Exactly.
Like how to win friends and influence people. What are the things that they're most interested in, taking an interest in that. Like, one thing which I found interesting since I'm becoming Singaporean la is the difference in nurturing relationships between Australia and Singapore. Like in Australia, you can meet with someone for an hour, not talk about business at all, and that was a great meeting. Because people basically buy on just relationships, and you can and basically go take them for beers, and that's pretty much how business is done. Where in Singapore, it is a lot more get to the point. How would you describe Indonesia?
I'm gonna put it this way: the Indonesian rapport and relationship building, there is no fixed playbook, right? The only only tangible way I can sort of tell you is that you got to be very clear on how you position yourself. You got to be very self-aware. You got to remove the agenda. Common things that I like to do, just catching up over lunch, dinner. You can't rush. You can't go straight to beers and bars. You got to ease yourself in. You got to make them comfortable. First time lunch, stay in touch with them. Remember them. Remembering them is a very important thing. So for example, if I met you the first time, I know your kid loves Lego or toy cars. Okay, hey Colin, I saw this, would your kid like this? Happy to bring it back from Indonesia for you. You remember that. Because I actually took what you said during that short 1 hour, I kept it close to me, and I remembered you. And that's how the relationship builds over time.
So it's very, very heavily rapport built.
Very heavy
being able to do it. What about when it comes to getting a local partner? So every single market is different. Like in Australia, if you want to get a local partner, a lot of the time it's, hey, we can cross-refer. You guys, same customer base, completely complementary angle. We can send you referrals, you can send us referrals. And I find that works relatively well in Australia. Singapore is interesting because I guess it kind of depends on who you're speaking to. Because it just, I guess, depends on where the company is from in terms of what the selling style should be to get a local partner on side, as well as what are the sort of incentives that you would want to do with that partner. So company wants to get into Indonesia, how would they go about getting a local partner? Like what is it that would make a local partner motivated to then go and resell their product?
I always love that aha moment when we introduce partners to each other. And that aha moment is, I see a product, I like it, I know exactly who I can introduce you to. Bang, 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 bang. Here's 5 introductions next week. You'll know it straight away. There is no science to it, unfortunately. There is a trial and error effect.
That's awesome.
But when you see those introductions being made, you know there's a very strong vested interest in you. Now the ball's in your court to invest back into them. Giving them the material, giving them the flexibility, and honestly, committing. In the sense in which, hey, if based on these 5 introductions, I see something, I'd love to give you the service contract. And understanding their business, the partner's business, is equally as important. In the sense in which, what are their main revenues? How much do they want to grow? Where do they want to grow? If they're a pure services company, and next month they're like, hey, maybe you want to go into the product, and you're bringing in this product, there's some synergy there. If they're a pure services company, you're selling product. For example, you help to close a product deal. You know that they're great at services. Just give them the services contract. And they're going to open up the other 5, 10 accounts that they have with you.
This is really interesting. The way that you're describing the selling style in Indonesia is actually a lot more closer to the selling style in Australia.
Yeah.
Which
it is
why,
surprisingly similar. But the conversations or the way you engage people is a lot different. Different in the sense in which I think the way I would run an Australian conversation is all about together, like, hey, Colin, this is what you do, this is what I do, and all that. Whereas Indonesia, I'm taking a real keen interest in them, rather than talking about myself. I'm actually very cautious about talking about myself in front of Indonesian, especially when I'm making that first meeting. I will share enough that they know who I am, but anymore, I'm terrified that it goes into a sales pitch. And I'm very cautious that that's exactly not what I want. I want to make them as I place a priority on comfort. Building that comfort.
If you're a Canadian company trying to get into Indonesia, like it's so different, or whether you're trying to get into Singapore. And I guess it's why I like doing the segment Scaling in APAC, because every single country is just so vastly different to one another. I guess if you're talking to, let's just say, Western audience, so European companies, American companies, and they're looking about going into Southeast Asia, what is some advice that you would provide about the differences in the various Southeast Asian markets? Like, what are some best practices or things that they should be aware of before they look into the region?
I think Europeans and Americans are very much process-driven. Not all, but I'd say that most that I've encountered have a very methodological approach. And when they talk to me about go-to-market, they're very much into the science of it. If we have 3,000 outreach, can we hit 30 opportunities, which leads to 3 sales based on X percentage of conversion? And then what's the method in which you're doing the outreach? Are you following the first sequence of emails, second sequence of outreach? How's your messaging structured? The process of doing it is very important.
Interesting.
The way I manage this is very straightforward. I'm happy to follow your process, but you have to give me some leeway on that relationship building exercise that I'm allowed to deviate. So being flexible and being open-minded and knowing that it is truly an art, not a science, we can still follow your scientific methods. I do agree, 3,000, all that, the math, it definitely needs to be there, that SOP needs to be there. But when it comes to that on-the-ground engagement, don't follow a 10 to 11 a.m. agenda for a meeting where the first 5 minutes is about mutual introductions, the next 10 minutes is product sharing. No. 55 minutes, how's your day, boo? How's your day, pak? Apa kabar? What's your son having for dinner today? Where's your daughter studying? Oh, really? Wow, awesome. Hey, do you know I recently saw that Hasbro toy that I think your son may like? These things matter. And that's on the European side. So giving that flexibility for the meetings, how they're run, that's very important. Yeah. And being ultimately open to new approaches.
Yeah.
In the American side, they don't care how you get there. Yeah. Just get there. All right? It's fine. And it speaks testaments to how well-run American businesses are on the execution side.
Yeah.
It's always about close. It's always about success.
Yeah.
Now, taking a very metric-based approach to Indonesia absolutely is one of the hardest. Because I can tell you, if you say 6 months forecast to close this opportunity, let's double that, and I can't even guarantee you we'll see the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Because you never know. It's once again an art and a science. Now, what businesses want to know is how do I turn it scientific?
Yeah.
But I can honestly tell you, you got to spread yourself out. Be very focused and understand what's very real. Have a very good knack at knowing who's the decision makers, who they are, what are the problem statements, how painful it is, because I can honestly tell you, it's only after like 3-4 years that could you truly get an opportunity like, yes, in 3 months, I know I'll give you the deal. Yeah, that kind of commitment level takes time to build and rapport. And that's why, going back to what Scalar does and what we're doing now on execution front, on that partnership, we're tapping on also the trust that the customers have with the local partners that we're going to be working with. Because if they ask and they say the timeline is 3-6 months, because of their long-standing relationship, it might really be 3 to 6 months. Because we're building on that relationship, or this concept of relationship arbitrage.
These are some of the questions that I honestly get when companies are looking to get into the Southeast Asian region. I have had this one about 5 times, but if Malaysia and Indonesia speak the same language, are they different in terms of go-to-market? This is a question I've had 5 times, to which I need to explain they don't actually speak the same language.
Yes. It's terrifying that people think that.
What would you say would be the differences in doing go-to-market between Malaysia and Indonesia? Because I explained to them, Malaysia is actually more similar to Singapore. So what you would use in Singapore, you'd probably tweak it, but I'd say those two would be more similar markets. Indonesia is something completely different.
In Malaysia, they have a very interesting system with their datoks and so forth that I'm only getting to be familiar with, but I think that plays a very important factor because seniority and being from a very Asian culture, these things matter. And having a very acute understanding of that will shape the way that we engage people. Whereas in Indonesia, I mean, everybody is bapak and ibu, right? Not that royalty element or that title element. Of course, you're still respectful to everybody, right? But I think that plays a very big part in the way you engage people.
Yeah.
But I'd say there is the strategy side of it, right? Then there is the execution side when you're on the ground running those meetings, right? I'd say that would be very similar in Indonesia, where you're still very much focused on the relationship building. But when people ask you that, you gotta paint the picture that there's really 2 sides to it. There is the MNCs, and then there is the large. And when I say large, I really mean large. Like probably approaching the size of the Indonesian conglomerates, maybe, when it comes to Malaysia. So you're gonna have to basically carve out 2 playbooks.
Yeah. You raised another topic that a lot of Western companies aren't actually familiar with, and that is the importance of job titles. I remember when I first discovered this, when I was working with American company Workday, and I was helping them to build out the team in Asia Pacific. Now, job titles, it doesn't really matter that much in Western countries. So one of the observations that I picked up even before moving here, it's whatever the job title would be in like in Australia or America, take the job title 2 steps more senior than it, and that's the role title that you should be using. So I guess culturally, why is that?
It's about pegging, and it's about respect. We are a very respectful culture.
Yeah.
Asians, by and large, we are very respectful. And one of the modicums of respect is the title in which we bring to the meeting. If I'm meeting the owner of the conglomerate, I have to bring my CEO or the highest person. I'll bring the chairman of my board if I have to meet them, because that is a modicum of respect. You, the most senior person in the room, are taking the time to speak to me, and I have to bring my most senior person that shows a respect and exchange of each other's time, and that matters. Whereas in the US, or in more Western countries, the concept is, most efficient, best. It's more meritocratic.
Yeah.
And both, there are merits and cons to both, right? I just think that in Indonesia, especially when you're going to meet, the title and that matching matters, because that helps the meeting to go, hey, okay, it's not say it's worth my time, but truly like that's what they think, oh, someone of equal caliber is coming to meet to me. This will be engaging, and I'm willing to meet because I'm going to learn something new. Someone of senior caliber is able to engage me, and that helps fundamentally to make that door a lot wider, as opposed to if you were to throw a BDR, business BDR, SDR to meet them. It's not that these people, in fact, more times than not, these people are actually outstanding. It's just that they don't have the title that matches well with the meeting.
That's very, very interesting. I haven't thought about. I've just never thought about it that way. I've got another one for you. So, I know this is something else that the audience will find interesting, and that is just the genuine. And we can talk about Singapore now. So, this is the general differences in doing business between Western countries to Singapore. So I remember I was doing a presentation on this, like what are the differences in doing business between Australia and Singapore? And some of the things that I automatically think of is, first of all, in Australia, we don't really give business cards. It's just shake hands, g'day, mate. Yeah. Job titles, so seniority really, really matters. Building rapport is also different, because in Australia, you can pretty much do a meeting and just chat nonsense for an entire hour, and that'll be a great meeting. What have been some of your observed differences between business culture in Angmo countries, or even Australia, as you're basically Australian nowadays, to business culture here?
Singapore, I'd say Singapore is a very calculated, not in a bad way, because we're very structured. Whereas Australians are a lot more free-flowing. The Americans, or the other sides of it, when it comes to looking at businesses, they are very strategic, and there is a strategy to it. Yeah. There is a growth plan, there is a long-term goal, and you got to see where that is, and align that, and make sure that the APAC story aligns with that, and everything will click really well and go smoothly. Yeah. And I think the last in Europe is, once again, going back to that process.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is very rigid.
Processes. So in each one. Funny enough, I was just talking about culture just now, right? We need to align ourselves culturally with everybody. Yep. The best go-to-market people that I've met, or I know, that have set up, are very culturally attuned, and they're able to articulate not revenue numbers, not even meeting numbers or anything, but they're able to articulate culture in a very scientific way that allows their management to understand and provides the basis to explain their performance in APAC. And in Indonesia, how do I tell you, there was a flood and the electric grid went down, so they can't meet us today. You're thinking like, what? We're gonna just Zoom. But it's these things that form the basis. When you hear it presented through a fantastic person that really understands the culture, it's like, in their culture, this is the case. So when this happens, they're unable to meet, and so we're gonna have to postpone the meeting to next month, because next week is also this, and that.
Yeah, these things do happen, so you kind of need to be aware of that. But I guess just a question to finish off, I'm fully expecting that the global tech market is going to boom again this year. High interest rates, which means that companies aren't making the same profits, so they're not investing it into like growth, etc., etc. With interest rates coming down, companies now restart. Great, we've got metrics to hit for our VCs, so they restart growing. Now, this is also how I first even came across Singapore, because the regional hub of, for me, Asia Pacific. What I find interesting is that a lot of people in Singapore view it as the regional hub for Southeast Asia. So it's a different appreciation of it. But let's just say in terms of Southeast Asia, if speaking to either Western, so American, European, whatever his audience, why is Southeast Asia a good market to, why is it such a good market to expand into?
At the end of the day, you want to talk about saturation and maturity in your own markets. How stiff is your competition in home grounds? And where is that sort of last few bastions of growth that we have back? And Southeast Asia is one of them. You will not find a lot of places where you, as a relatively unknown product or company, can come into a market with no reference whatsoever, find some local partner that's great, awesome, and go and win a huge, massive enterprise deal. And it is fundamentally because of relationships that you're able to do that. So the biggest thing that a lot of people think is big markets or that. And funny enough, I said the exact opposite. You know, the market is extremely relationship driven. You're going to have to put a lot of high effort into it. But because the market is so relationship driven, it is actually sufficiently inefficient for there to still be opportunities.
Yeah.
There are some companies that have not yet been exposed and touched. There are some companies that have not seen these products, that are not yet exposed to the kind of amazing products that we have in other markets. And therefore, there are still opportunities to compete, and there's still opportunities where you have a competitive advantage against the legacy technologies that they're using or the legacy products that they're using. And so when you think about Southeast Asia and you think of the opportunities and why it's big, just remember that, like you said, the cloud penetration is still low. We still have an underbanked population.
Yeah.
And we're all still working on things like open banking, having a common payment codes even within the country. So dream big in Southeast Asia, be ambitious, but be very focused, and always remember that there is an art to it in addition to the science to it when coming here.
Nope, I love it. On top of that, some of the world's fastest growing economies.
Exactly.
There are some absolutely amazing startups that are coming out of here. There's 600 million people, and 2 are bangs.
The most Singaporean Angmo and the most Angmo Singaporean.
Fantastic. Thank you, my man.
Anytime.
Right. I envy the session you had with Jing Rui. And this guy is really authentic, right? I resonate with many of the great points. He said that he's in Indonesia for the last couple of years, but he is still not understanding the local that he desires to be. And so that's the value of, I think, the webinar series that we have, right? that these people and these guest speakers that we're inviting in here, they share real experience and they're brutally honest. Yeah. So a few points that I took away from the part about building local relationships and not thinking that you'll get business in the first 6 months. I think that's just so true. That's managing expectations, that you expect to get immediate business and you won't get it. Right. That means that you have to talk to your higher HQ and make sure that you align your own success to the matrix that is realistic. Right. So that's some real truths that I learned from Jing Rui. Yeah. What about you? Which are the parts of the session that resonates the most with you?
Definitely in terms of building the local relationships. I've always said that APAC is an amazing market. People just need to kind of know what to expect when coming here. You want to be able to shorten sales cycles, and sometimes it's sales methodology that helps to shorten sales cycles. Sometimes it's KTV buzz. You never know your luck in the big city. So that's something that I learned from Jing Rui. I mean, look, doing business is different in every single country, and ultimately, this is somewhat universal. When people like and they trust you, and you're able to build rapport with them, it's going to help you to be able to win, to be able to win business. But when you also show a commitment to understanding how to localize the business, to do business in that market, that's going to go a long way to shortening the sales cycle and getting the money, as we say around here, Ming Song. No money,
no honey.
Exactly la. Anything else that you wanted to add?
There are lots of interesting tidbits that we can learn from him, but I'd like to give a shout out and remind our guests on the call. If you have some questions that you would like to ask and we can address on this particular session, please leave your comments, ask your questions, and we'll be happy to address some of them so that we can get the most out of this sharing.
Yep, except for explaining what a KTV bar is. That's for another time. So we have our first question. I'm probably going to leave it to you to pronounce that name.
Jia Hui. I think this could be a local person, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Speaking of cultural nuances, how can you train and educate your team to be culturally sensitive and adaptable when working across different APAC regions? Let me take this. As someone who, a lot of people do get confused or are surprised to hear this, that I'm not actually Singaporean, but as someone whose business has expanded, I mean, Australia is part of Asia Pacific, but it's obviously it's the Beng of Asia, basically. Whenever I think of learning and understanding local business culture, I always think about two examples. The first one being Japan, which is one of the most different markets on the planet. And for anyone who's ever traveled there, I highly recommend before you go, read up about cultural customs and nuances. Or you'll end up doing stupid things like I do, such as sticking your chopsticks in a rice bowl and not knowing what that actually means. So one of the things that you can do is definitely read up about it. Another thing that you can do is just ask people who've actually done business there what they need to be aware of. I've given this speech to an Australian audience that's looking at coming into Southeast Asia, and I explained that the way that people meet one another is different. In Singapore, people give card because there is a value associated with the seniority that's on the card. It's a way that a person expresses their identity. Whereas in Australia and many Western markets, it's basically just add somebody on LinkedIn. So it's just knowing some of these cultural nuances, and if you show to other people that you've taken the time to actually learn it, it really goes a long way. So the best way of doing it, chat GPT. Thoughts?
I also think it has to be an intentional act by the management team on what is the mix of the people on the ground, right? You obviously want to have some representative, and depending on the culture of the company that you come from, I know most Japanese companies and Korean companies included insist to have a local Korean, even if they're expanding into the Indonesian markets.
Yeah.
They always do.
Yes.
Right, but mix it up with enough local representative.
Yeah.
Have them train back in your higher HQ, get to understand how they could leverage and get the best out of that mix. I think that mix, that intentional mix of having someone local and having someone as a representative from your HQ would be what the management should be very intentional about.
Can I actually just share a couple of anecdotal examples of some of the differences of doing business in Western markets to Asia Pacific? So first of all, in Asia Pacific, job titles are higher. If it's an account executive in a place like Sydney, it's going to be a regional sales director in a place like Hong Kong. The hierarchy is a thing in many Asian cultures, and the more senior your job title, the more, I guess, please back me up here, but it's more widely respected. So having a more senior job title helps to open up more doors. Please explain this in a way that makes sense.
Right. I think in many Asian contexts, people value that, I'm dealing with a VP. In reality, I think we have to achieve two things. If the job title is a VP, someone you speak to, someone speaking to a VP tend to respect that without understanding whether they are capable or not.
Yeah.
They just immediately have that respect.
Yeah.
And which is quite common in this part of the world where you have a artificially elevated job title. I think that's excellent in some contexts, but it's also down to the individual to be able to carry that off, right? So that's the pros and the cons of having that elevated job title, in my humble opinion.
It's definitely something to be aware of. But other than that, I'm going to stick to my original hypothesis. It's just ChatGPT. There's a couple of markets in Asia Pacific, in particular Japan, definitely China, and Indonesia, where definitely read up about local cultures and customs, as there's many, many easy ways that an Ang Mo can trip up when trying to do business in those regions. So I hope that answered your question. The next question we hear is from Paul. You spoke about hearing problem statements through local relationships. So how do you effectively translate those problem statements into actionable product or service improvements? Let me just take a guess. Let me just take a stab at that. This is something which is quite near and dear to my heart because I actually have lost count of the amount of amazing, highly funded US technology companies that enter Asia Pacific, and they're doing well in every single part of the world, but they just burn through a whole bunch of cash and get this part of the world completely wrong. And ultimately it comes down to not localizing your product. There's really something to be said about having someone who is a local product manager who can help to be able to translate between the company as well as what the local audience wants. Because what somebody wants in New York City is very, very different to what somebody's going to want in Norway to what someone's going to want in Malaysia. So it's understanding what local customers' requirements are, and it's being flexible. Like rolling out just a US playbook, sometimes it works. A lot of the times I've seen people lose a lot of money. Understand what people actually want in the local market. Keep 80% or 70% of your product exactly the same, but be prepared to be able to tweak 20 to 30% of it to suit the local audience. And if you've got that sort of flexibility about you, one, it shows commitment to the region. Two, it's very much in line with what people are asking. And three, if you want to build and scale a business, you kind of need to understand what customers are actually asking for to begin with. So it's something that you should be doing as best practice anyway if you want to be successful in growing a business. Anything that you'd like to add?
And I have a alternative thought. Honestly, even 90% of the product could be the same, but change the way you communicate it. The product is exactly the same, but you express the problem statement in a different way. You express how you solve that problem through your product in a different way that resonates with the local markets. And I would like to go in a little bit deeper, and especially based on what we heard from Jing Rui earlier on finding out about problem statement, not going in too quickly to the market and says that, oh, this is my product, this has all the awesome features, and this has all the awesome specifications, and we are here to be the hero, right? In Communication 101, where we talk about placing your customer as the hero, we are here to help you achieve better success. I think it works equally well for B2B and B2C. And especially in SaaS products, because most SaaS products and most technology products and services are here to accelerate, to make the lives of the people they are serving better. So never be one to shout out loud how awesome and how great you are. you're here to help someone's lives turn better, and just be sensitive in the way you listen out to how each local market talks about their own problems. Yeah.
I agree. Next question we have from Kai. What are the most common mistakes companies make when localizing their customer service and support in Asia Pacific? I can answer that. Not realizing just how many different languages there are in Asia Pacific. A lot of US companies base their customer support in India and Philippines. Now, that's great if you're looking for English speaking ability, and it's great if you're also, India, has a lot of different languages, as does Philippines, but let's say whether it's in Hindi, Punjabi, or whether it's in Tagalog, but Korea doesn't speak Tagalog. Indonesia doesn't speak Tagalog. Vietnam doesn't speak Tagalog. Yes, base your local customer support in Asia Pacific, but also just be aware of where your customers are. Because if you're signing a lot of customers in Indonesia or Malaysia or Japan, then you are going to need to add somebody in who's actually fluent in speaking one of those languages. So that's just one of the things that trip up, because English is not universally spoken across APAC. It's actually not very well spoken at all in a place like Japan, where Japan actually has the biggest deal sizes on the planet, bigger than the US market. It takes a lot longer to close. It can be significantly more frustrating. You will drink a lot more alcohol with your clients, but the deal sizes are colossal. That said, Japanese is also not widely spoken outside of Japan. So it's just knowing and understanding of these are the regions that we're going to be focusing in on. And the majority of the time when a company enters APAC, there's a couple of primary regions that they want. And that's the highest GDP per capita markets of Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong. Great, in all three of them, you can get by with English. And then it's Taiwan, Korea, and Japan. You need someone who can speak Japanese, someone who can speak Korean, and someone who can speak Mandarin. But although there are quite a few in the business setting that can speak English in Taiwan. So that's just one of the things to be aware of. Where are our customers great? What's the language that we need to bring in?
And talking about English, I probably can train myself to differentiate an Australian, or rather someone who resides in Melbourne speaking English, and someone residing in Sydney. Just yesterday, I was on a trade show floor. I was speaking to this Ang Mo who looks a little bit like you, and I managed to differentiate. Hey, this dude is from Melbourne, even though his company is actually from the UK, right? And English is not universal. So
yeah.
So I just sharing how it perceived same language has its own nuances in each part of the world. Just with English alone.
Actually, I just wanted to say, I just got back from San Francisco and I was complimented 3 times on how well I speak English. So that was quite nice. I even got into a taxi and a guy was like, "Oh man, that's a great accent, man. Where's your accent from?" I'm like, "Oh, Australia." "Australia? My mum's from England as well." I'm like, "Oh, we might as well be cousins, you never know."
Possibly.
So there are differences. And from Arush, how do you balance global brand consistency with the need for local adaptation in marketing and communications? That's a hard question. Because I would say 50% of it you should have consistent globally, but the other 50% you really need to tailor it to the local market. Like just going back to me being complimented on how well I speak English, American English is spoken differently to Australian English. So you can have the brand messaging in the US, but if you're looking to come into the Australian market or the Singaporean market, people speak it slightly differently. There is different slang, innuendo that you just need to be able to tailor it to. So what I would say, and it goes back to my earlier points, let's just say 70% of it's similar, but be prepared to tweak 30% of it. And tweaking that 30% could really be the difference between make or break. So just ensure that there's some degree of flexibility. And if you do that, in particular in Asia Pacific, I think that it will serve you very well. Any thoughts you want to add?
I work a lot with large tech brands as well when we have a global playbook that ensures that this entire campaign has a certain look and feel. But like you said, 30% is they put in lots of effort to make sure that 30% is very well localized. And the way that language is spoken, the way they talk to the people in the marketing and comms materials, both in design and right. I wanted to just bring up one simple example that I encountered a couple of years back. Most people might correlate wayang kulit, right? Wayang kulit, which is shadow puppet, right, as a Indonesian art.
Yep.
But seemingly, there is a certain variation of those stock photos that we might find, which is really nice, but there's also a variation of that stock photo that actually doesn't necessarily state very well. It has a negative connotation. So unless, and then we learn it the hard way, unless you are someone well-versed in that particular country at least, you might not be able to tell if something is rude or something is complimentary. So we had to learn it the hard way. So always have good local partners who reside in that place. Is one thing about speaking that language, even if you reside overseas, like Singapore is a great hub. But exactly like what Jing Rui says, right? He may understand a little bit of Bahasa Indonesia, but if you don't reside in that place and understand the cultural nuances, some of these things don't exactly make sense to you.
Yep.
Right. You need to have that nose to catch some very, very minor but important nuances that would exactly seem rude if you put a wrong image or put a wrong marketing comms assets in front of the people you want to attract. So have a good local pair of eyes who can check your marketing comms messaging as well as visuals. And that's exactly what we do over here, that we have a good network of people who are well versed in each local market. So the asset is still centrally controlled, centrally designed with inputs from the local markets, but the final round of quality checks and controls goes down to the local people in each market.
Yep.
That's so important.
Can I just add a last funny little part to that? I'll give you an example of one between Singapore and Australia. Expression that you'll hear very, very commonly in Singapore, completely normal. In Australia, you'll end up in a lawsuit. When in the process of hiring, saying that we need to hire a local. In Singapore, it means that you have a certain quota for employment passes. Very, very common expression that you hear. In Australia, you'll either end up at the HR department or the Fair Trade Ombudsman for harassment. It carries a very, very different connotation, and basically exactly the same saying, but two different countries will end up in two very, very different outcomes. So it's good to have some of this ahead of time before expansion.
Exactly. Right. So now for the exciting announcements, we will be launching a new community page. So we will be promoting Scaling in APAC as a movement. We'll be sharing snippets of all our webinars, and you can also register for our upcoming webinars through this link. So don't forget to drop us a follow, and we'll send you the link for those of you who have subscribed and joined us on Scaling APAC sessions so far.
Yep. So thank you to everyone for tuning into our webinar. On screen, you're going to see a poll come up. Please help us to make the next event even better by filling it up. And if you're interested in what we've been sharing today and you'd like to speak to us about it, do leave your contact details and we'll come back to you. Other than that, join us for the next exciting episode of Scaling with APAC. We have a very, very interesting human being that we're getting on stage. So thank you to everyone, and we will see you in the next episode.
Right, see you.